So this is a comical representation of the Bandra sea link. Now imagine you are approaching this sea link from the side of Bandra, and instead of paying toll tax, you're paying something called as exchange fees. And at the end of the bridge, instead of getting off at Worli, you're getting off at that place called Capital Markets. Now that you have reached the Capital Markets, you will be able to execute your trades, your F&O trades, your equity cash deals, etc. Simply, that's the business model of an exchange. They help you connect to the capital markets, thereby finishing your deals. Another example of such kind of toll bridge business would be an app store or a play store. Hi, my name is Shantanu, and today I'll be speaking about the Indian stock exchanges. I'll come to the title of today's topic in a few slides. So, before I begin with my presentation, please take note of the upcoming FOF dates. So, with that, let's begin. I'll start my presentation with a quote by Warren Buffett. So, he said, in an inflationary world, a toll bridge would be a great thing to own because you have laid out the capital costs, you have built it in old dollars, and you don't have to keep replacing it. This makes absolute sense, but this can also be used as a mental model. I came across this idea in one of the blogs by Professor Bakshi, where he said, I don't want to be a toll bridge, I want to be its meaning. Now, instead of me explaining how this mental model might work, I'll talk about, I have generated an AI picture for you. So, this is a comical representation of the Bandra sea link. Now imagine you are approaching this sea link from the side of Bandra, and instead of paying toll tax, you're paying something called as exchange fees. And at the end of the bridge, instead of getting off at Worli, you're getting off at that place called Capital Markets. Now that you have reached the Capital Markets, you will be able to execute your trades, your F&O trades, your equity cash deals, etc. Simply, that's the business model of an exchange. They help you connect to the capital markets, thereby finishing your deals. Another example of a toll bridge kind of business would be an app store or a play store, where, say, if you want to download any apps, odds are you might want to use the services of an app store or a play store. So that explains my today's topic and the title, Stock Exchanges, a toll bridge to capital markets. Now, before delving deep into the business, I'll speak about the history of stock exchanges in India. So it all started in the 1850s, right under a banyan tree. Now today the banyan tree is not there, but it was opposite to what's today called the Asiatic Society. In those days, there was a concept called as the joint stock companies, which was introduced by the British in India, and this led to a surge in cash volumes that were observed. So there were a few bank stocks and a few textile stocks that were traded. But it was very unorganized, and in 1875 the brokers decided to form an association. They named it the Native Shares and Stock Brokers Association, and interestingly the cost of membership was as low as 1 rupee per person. And 100 years later, in the 1980s and the 1990s, the cost was as high as crores of rupees. So all of this went on for the next 110 years, and till 1992 more than 20 such regional stock exchanges were formed across India. But one thing was very common among them. They used the open outcry system, which is nothing but the flow trading, and it was largely inefficient, manual, and was very, very exposed to the human error. And finally, in 1992, a huge security scam broke out. It exposed the inefficiencies, the payment crisis, regulatory loophole, and the market manipulation that was rampant during those days. And finally, a need for a national and a professionally run stock exchange was felt. And resultantly, in 1992, the National Stock Exchange was incorporated. In 93, they gained the status of stock exchange, and in 1994, they started their operations. Interestingly, they had no trading floor even in 1994, which was obvious because they wanted to connect brokers across India. So moving on to the next decade, we saw the introduction of internet trading and derivatives trading. Now these derivatives that were introduced in 2001 are not the ones which are top of the town today. These are the longer tenure derivatives, and I will get to derivatives specifically in a few slides. Moving on, in the next decade, we saw a pickup in algo trading and HFT trading. Basically, algo trading is the utilization of computer algorithms to execute trades, and high frequency traders, that is HFT, is a specific subsection of algo trading where profitability is dependent on the speed of execution. So there were services by the exchanges like tick by tick data, the infamous co-location service, and the direct market access, which were provided to these HFT and algo players, which in return increased their volumes. But in 2015, we saw the Colo scam, which was brought to light by an anonymous letter. So I won't speak a lot about the Colo scam, but I would urge everyone to read this book called Absolute Power by Sucheta Dalal and Devashish Basu. It gives a vivid and a detailed explanation of the entire Colo scam and the things that happened which led up to the scam. Moving on, in 2016, we saw the introduction of weekly options. Now, these are the options that are the talk of the town today as well. And in 2016, we saw the first weekly option, which was the Bank Nifty weekly options, which were introduced by NSE. This was followed by another weekly options introduced by NSE on the Nifty 50 index. And finally, BSO also followed, and they introduced the Sensex weeklies. And moving on, in 2020, something what I would call a retail revolution took place, which was kind of an inflection point for the stock exchanges in India. So there were multiple factors, few of which I have listed. First one was the virtual KYC, which was enabled by SEBI. So before 2020, what used to happen as a retail trader, if I wanted to open a demat account, I had to, there was some leg of the entire process which was done physically. But after the virtual KYC being enabled, everything was seamless and converted to an online method, which made it very, very easy as a retail trader to open a demat account. The second factor was the existence of discount brokers. So they charged very, very low discount, they charged very, very low brokerage, which led to people accessing the capital markets more because it was so easy to access and so cheap to access. The third one was the COVID-19 lockdown. Now, all of us were in our home. We were locked down by the COVID-19 and we had some time left to actually access the capital markets. That and the existence of cheap options, which were introduced in 2016, this actually paved the way for the inflection point. And I'll be talking about these inflection points in few of my charts that I'll present later. So this is a chart, the rise of discount brokers in India. So in 2020, they had a 28% market share. But today, they have almost 2/3 of the market share. And that is coupled with the rise in demat accounts. So demat accounts was approximately 4 crores during FY20. Since then, it has kind of 5x'd from FY20 in the next 5 years, that is FY25. So now that I've spoken a bit about the history of exchanges in India, I'll switch gears and speak about the business. So going forward, my presentation will be divided into the following 4 sections. Firstly, I'll speak about the revenue, then expenses. This will be followed by a brief discussion about unit economics of and how does that look for an Indian stock exchange, which will be followed by a brief comparison of the Indian exchanges with the global exchanges. So this is just an overview chart of what are the revenue sources of a stock exchange. So BSE makes approximately 2,000 crores of total top line revenue in FY25. On the other hand, NSE made approximately 17,000 crores. So what comprised it? Firstly, it was the trade facilitation, that is the proper toll bridge business. They facilitated trading in cash and the FNO segment, which formed approximately 70% of the revenue for BSE and 80% for NSE. Then there are a list of ancillary services, few I'll be discussing. First one being co-location. So it forms somewhere around 5 to 10% of the revenues for NSE and BSE. Then there's another service called C&S, which stands for clearing and settlement. Now this service, although it's not a huge chunk of the revenue, it is a very relevant service that they provide from an entire market infrastructure point of view. Then there's another service called listing fees. Basically, it's a fee income that they make. So it's 2% for NSE, but it's 12% for BSE. And then there are other services, few of which I'll be discussing going forward. So coming to the largest segment, which is trade facilitation in options. I'm sure everyone knows what option contracts are, so I won't discuss that in detail. There are different kinds of option contracts. I would divide option contracts based on their underlying. So it could either be equities, it could be non-equities. Under equities, it could be stocks or indices. Under non-equities, it could be commodities, currencies, interest rate. The list goes on. But today we'll be focusing on the index and the stock options. And apart from that, I can also divide options based on the expiries. So it could be your weekly expiries, it could be your monthly expiries. Weekly expiries are the ones which expire once a week, and these are the options that are kind of the talk of the town today. So I'll say the point numbers 2, 3, and 4 speak about a few terms that I would like everyone to know. This will make it easy for me to present my future slides. So the first point speaks about notionals and premiums. So as everyone knows, every option contract will have an underlying financial asset. And the value of the financial asset is basically the exposure that you will be getting. And that value is called as notional versus premium. So premium is the value of the option contract. And so I can easily say that premium is the price you pay and notional is the exposure that you get. I'll explain this to you using an example. So this was my market watch list. Nifty was forming a part of it. So that was trading somewhere around 25,000 and there was a call option on Nifty approximately 87 rupees. So in this case, 87 will be the premium and 25,200 will be the notional. Then there's something called as margins. So at the time you sell options without having inventory of options, in that case you will be depositing margins with the exchange. These margins will be returned back to you, adjusted for your profits and losses. Now coming to the third point, ADTO. Now before explaining what ADTO is, I'll tell you why is it relevant. So it says, suppose there are two periods, period A and period B. I want to calculate how the premiums have increased. So the total premium in period A was 1000 and in period B it was 1100. I can easily conclude it's a 10% growth. But what if I look at the number of trading days? It was 10 in period A, 11 in period B. Now the effective premium per day has been 100 for both period A and period B. Therefore, I can easily conclude that organically no premiums have risen during the two periods. And premium per day basically enables me to do an apples to apples comparison, and this is nothing but ADTO. It stands for average daily turnover. It can either be calculated at a notional level or a premium level, but the objective stays the same. Then coming to the fourth point, premium to notional ratio. This is as simple as it could get, a ratio between premiums and notionals. Just as an example, so TCS was one stock that I was looking at, trading at approximately 3000. There were two call options on TCS. The October expiry trading at 53, November expiry trading at 96. Now in this case, the premium to notional ratio will be 53 divided by 3000, that is approximately 176 basis points. And the November expiry, it will have a premium to notional ratio of 320 basis points, give or take. And the Nifty option that we were discussing earlier, that would have a premium to notional ratio of approximately 34 basis points. Now in this case, you would observe that the premium to notional is very, very different for all the three call options. And another thing that you might observe is the number of days to expiry. So days to expiry is if I'm holding an option contract and 5 days later it is expiring, it will have a 5 days to expiry. So you would observe that the premium to notional ratio and the days to expiry have a positive correlation. And that is basically the objective of premium to notional ratio, to tell me how the market is favoring either the longer dated options by indicating a larger premium to notional ratio, or the market is favoring the shorter dated options, which will be indicated by a lower premium to notional ratio. I'll tell you what the market has been indicating in the last 10 years in one of my slides later. And finally, how exchanges make money. So think of an exchange as a modern day platform business. Like a platform having a take rate, an exchange will also have a take rate. So in case of NSE, they have a take rate of approximately 35 rupees per 1 lakh of premium traded on the exchange. Very important to note that it is premium to which the revenues are linked. And as far as BSE is considered, their take rate is approximately 32.5 rupees per 1 lakh of premium traded on their exchange. Now, so this is the industry notional ADTO. Few things that I would mention here. Firstly, it has seen a 10-year CAGR of approximately 66%. It has grown from as low as 3 lakh crore rupees per day in FY15 to as high as 420 lakh crore rupees per day in FY25. Post which it has seen a slight dip, approximately 5 to 6%, and this is due to the SEBI circular which was issued in October 2024. I'll come to the circular in a few slides, but before that I'll be discussing the effects of that circular. And again, you'll also see that after FY21 was the period that the notional has seen an exponential growth. And that is because of the retail revolution that we were discussing few slides earlier. Similar has been the case with premiums. So it has grown from approximately 1000 crore rupees per day to as high as 71,000 crore rupees per day in FY25, which resulted in a 10-year CAGR of approximately 44%. Same explanations here. You'll see a dip after FY25. You'll see the exponential growth after FY20. Both are the same reasons. After 20, the exponential growth is due to the retail revolution, and after FY25, the dip has been due to the October SEBI circular. Now, this is the premium to notional ratio that we were discussing. Now, in this case, we can easily divide this chart into two pieces. The first piece being the period represented before FY21, where the average premium to notional ratio is approximately 50 to 55 basis points, post which we have been seeing a steady decline in the premium to notional ratio. So, from 50 basis points, today it's approximately 17 to 18 basis points, and that has also been led by the retail revolution. Because as a retail investor, I would focus on what's giving me the highest exposure for the lowest premium. And that's why people have been shifting towards the lower duration contracts, which is giving me the most exposure for a given level of premium, hence the reduction in the premium to notional ratio. And this is the market share of the two parties, NSE and BSE. The blue color represents NSE, and it has been dominant in this space till FY23. They had a 100% market share. But after FY23, since FY24, they have been gaining some market share, 3% in FY20. By they, I mean BSE. So in FY24, they had a 3% market share. Today, it's approximately 23%. I'll come to the reason in a few slides. This slide. So now I'll speak about the various products that are traded in the option segment. So this slide will represent the products before 20th November 2024, and the next slide will talk about what happened after 20th November 2024. Basically, that date is the date when the circular, the October 2024 SEBI circular got effective, and I'll be coming to the circular in a few slides. So before 20th November 2024, let's discuss about the weekly segment. In the weekly segment, basically there are 5 trading days in a trading week, and all 5 days are dominated by NSE, as you would have seen in the market share. And how do they do that? They have expiries on each and every 5 days of the trading week. Thereby people will focus on NSE because of the superior liquidity. But BSE was also offering a few option contracts. They had 3: Sensex, BankX, and there was another called as Sensex 50. But they found little to no volumes. Apart from that, all the weekly contracts were also offered in the monthly segment, as well as option contracts, which are in India not available in the weekly segment. It's only available in the monthly segment. Also, one stat that I would like to point out towards is the weekly index options formed approximately 70% of the total industry volumes. So, few slides earlier, 64,000 crores per day is the industry volume in FY24. So out of the 64,000 crores, 70%, that is approximately 40 to 45,000 crores, belongs only to the weekly segment. This is how concentrated things were. But after 20th November 2024, both the exchanges had to stop all their weekly contracts, and they could offer just one. So NSE continued with the Nifty 50 weeklies, and BSE continued with Sensex weeklies. Now suddenly BSE found a lot of white space in the entire trading week. So earlier all 5 days were dominated by NSE, but after the circular effects, BSE found 4 empty trading days. They could easily select one trading day and place their Sensex expiry on that day, thereby gaining a lot of volumes, which you might have seen in the increase in market share for BSE. But the concentration in this case was even grim. I would like to show a metaphor for this. So the falling building, this indicates the falling industry premium. It fell from 70,000 crores to approximately 66,000 crores, and that is represented only by 2 contracts. So first one is the Nifty weeklies and Sensex weeklies. Now these 2 contracts form approximately 65 to 70% of the total volumes. So anywhere between 45,000 crores to 50,000 crores is just 2 contracts. So now finally coming to the SEBI circular. So there are a total of 6 points that were there in the circular, but according to me, point numbers 4th and 5th were the most severe. I'll be discussing about these 2 points, and we can discuss about the other 4 points after the presentation. So firstly, the 5th point, it said rationalization of weekly index derivative products. Basically what they said was one exchange can have only one weekly expiry. They have to discontinue all of the other expiries. So that has been visible here. NSE had 5 earlier. Now they have 1. Similar is the case for BSE. And this has actually led to increase in market share for BSE, plus it has also led to a reduction in volumes. Now coming to the fourth point, which is contract size, also known as lot size in industry parlance, for index derivatives. So I'll tell you what contract size is firstly. I can not go and buy just one option contract, say on of Sensex. If I buy just one option contract on Sensex, my notional exposure will be 85,000. That is the value of Sensex today. But as per the rules, if I buy an option contract from a stock exchange in India, I'll have to have some minimum notional exposure. So the minimum notional exposure should be before the circular, the minimum notional exposure had to be 5 lakh rupees. Now practically, as far as Sensex options are considered, one lot size is basically a combination of different option contracts, just so that we can meet the contract size rules. For Sensex, the one lot size had a combination of 10 options on Sensex. That way, 85,000 multiplied by 10, that is 8,50,000, and that was the contract size, which easily fulfills this requirement. But what happened in the circular was that SEBI increased the contract size from 5 lakhs to 15 lakhs. Now, suddenly the requirements were kind of 3 times higher. And so BSE, as a result of this circular, had to increase their lot size, because 10 wouldn't make the cut now. Now they did 20. So 20 multiplied by 85,000, approximately 17 lakhs, and that is the minimum contract size. Now that fulfills this role. What happened was, in the entire pyramid of option contracts, there are a few players, mainly individuals and a few institutions, who operate at the lowest segment, where they try getting the cheapest of the cheap option contracts, and they can't afford the expensive ones. So once the notionals kind of tripled or doubled in case of Sensex, premium to notional ratio kind of stayed the same, because this circular wouldn't affect premium to notional ratio, and resultantly my premiums also increased. Now as a trader who's operating at the lowest level of the pyramid, I wouldn't be able to afford the higher premiums. Thereby, I'm kind of washed away from the entire market infrastructure. This has led to a reduction in volumes, as you would have seen in my previous slides. So this was the SEBI circular. Another publication that I found very interesting was the SEBI study on performance of retail traders. So it had a lot of points. I'll summarize the top 3 which I found. So how did individual traders perform? Collectively, they made 93% of them made losses. Apart from that, collectively during FY24, they made losses of 75,000 crore rupees. And only 1% of them made substantial profits. By substantial profits, I mean 1 lakh of profits adjusted for transaction costs. So that's how grim the situation was as far as retail traders are considered. Now coming to the prop traders, who are their counterparties in most of the cases. In those cases, collectively, prop traders and FIs made profits of 61,000 crore rupees. So options is a zero sum game. All the money is being transferred from the retail trader to the prop trader. And finally, there was an interesting point on persistence. So I'll just repeat whatever I read. So 75% of the individual traders who made losses during FY22 and FY23 not only continued to trade in FY24, but also continued making losses. So that was a very interesting point that I came across. So this was my discussion on option segment. Now switching gears and talking to the second largest space, that is cash. So what is cash? Cash is basically your individual stocks that we buy and sell, and how exchanges make money here. So there are 2 cases. Firstly, the normal case. Again, it's a take rate where NSE takes approximately 2.97 rupees per 1 lakh of stocks traded on the exchange. Now, as far as as far as BSE is concerned, they charge approximately 3.75 rupees per 1 lakh of cash traded on BSE. Now, there is another segment which is called as special stocks. It is BSE's X and Z categories. X stands for exclusive stocks, which are listed only on BSE, and Z categories are the non-compliant stocks which might have not fulfilled all the exchange rules. So if you want to trade in these categories, you have to pay a higher cost. You have to pay a take rate of approximately 100 rupees per 1 lakh of cash traded on 1 lakh of special stocks traded on BSE. There's nothing like this for NSE. And the third point speaks about mutual fund orders. So as an investor, I have 2 ways of buying mutual funds. I can directly contact the AMC and buy their mutual funds. Other way is that I can leverage the services of a distributor or an aggregator. Now in this case, as an aggregator, I would have hundreds of different clients, and I wouldn't want to speak to each and every AMC specifically and place orders with them individually. I would want something that collates all the different AMCs and different schemes, and that's where the platforms offered by NSE comes in. There's Star MF by BSE and MFSS by NSE. So these platforms collate most of the AMCs and most of the schemes into one single screen. So as an aggregator, I'll just place one order. And for providing the service, exchanges obviously charge a fee, and they don't charge a fee to the distributor or the aggregator. The fee is paid by the AMC, and in this case fee is paid on a per order basis. In this case it's not ad valorem, it is on a per order basis. So the headline fee is approximately 4 rupees per order, but after adjusting for discounts, on an average the fee comes to between 3 to 3.5 rupees per order. So talking about BSE only, they have an 85% market share, but market share of the number of orders that have been fulfilled via this route. So currently in FY25, I saw that BSE executed a total of 66 crore orders. And if we go back 5 years earlier, in FY21, they executed just 10 crore orders. So it was a 6 times jump in the span of 5 years. Now coming to the overall cash market trends, so the 10-year CAGR has been 19%, which fairly represents the financialization of savings theme that has been playing out. So it was as low as 213 billion rupees during FY15 per day, and today it's approximately 1.2 trillion rupees. It has fallen a bit to 1.1 trillion rupees during FY26 year to date. And at the background, the bar charts that you can see is basically the representation of the market share. So NSE has a market share of 90% approximately, remaining is held by BSE. Now coming to the final segment in the trade facilitation part, which is futures. So futures, basically both options and futures are derivatives, but the key difference is that in case of options, you will be paying premiums to buy options. In case of futures, you won't pay premiums, but you will have to deposit something called as margins. Now these margins will be refunded back to you again, adjusting for your profits and losses. In this case, NSE has a total monopoly in case of futures. They have a 99.5% market share. And how does NSE make money here? Again, it's a take rate. They have a take rate of approximately 1.73 rupees per 1 lakh of futures traded on NSE. And this is the overall futures ADTO of NSE over time. It has also grown at a 10-year CAGR of 14% from 513 billion rupees during FY15 to as high as 1.8 trillion rupees during FY25, post which it has seen a sharp decline. So now coming to the other key income streams, I'll talk about a few of them. Firstly, co-location. So first I'll explain why co-location is required. So for that I'll reiterate what HFT was. HFT is nothing but a type of algo traders where profitability is dependent on your speed of execution. Now, one of the factors which affects the speed of execution is the distance of your trading server and the exchange server on the other side. So if you are placed far away, odds of your order being executed slowly is very high as compared to someone who's sitting right here in Mumbai, where the exchange servers are also in Mumbai. So this was the need of co-location. So exchanges realized that it is not a level playing field and we need to do something about it. That's where they came about with co-location. Now in this case, exchanges provide a space for the traders. Basically they provide a co-location rack in their very own data centers. That's where the servers of the exchanges are also located, and that way the geographical distance from thousands or hundreds of kilometers is reduced to few meters at the very highest end. And for this, obviously exchanges will charge a fee. So this is a schedule of the co-location charges that exchanges charge. So there are 2 to 3 kinds of expenses as a HFT. Firstly, there is an initial setup charge, which is kind of a one-off expense, only charged by NSE, not BSE. The second is the base rentals, which is the annual charge per rack per annum. By rack, I mean one co-location rack. And it increases with the number of co-location racks and the size of the co-location rack. The third point is the annual charge for messages per second. Now, what do I mean by message? If I place a buy order, a sell order, or even a modification or cancellation of order, that would be counted as one single message. So in this case, basically message per second is the capacity of your co-location rack. As the number of messages increases, right from 40 messages per second to as 1000 messages per second, your fees will also increase, or your co-location charge. Now coming to the second kind of service that I'll talk about, listing and data services. Listing is basically your annuity kind of incomes where every listed entity needs to pay a listing fee. Now, and also every company that comes for an IPO will have to pay a listing fee to get listed on the desired exchange. Other service is the data services. Now, I had discussed something called as tick by tick data that was provided by the stock exchanges right back in 2010, and they're still providing it. For that, they charge a subscription fee, which is called as the data services that exchanges make. Not a very huge segment for the exchanges. And the third point is the investment income. Now, the margins that I was discussing about, as an exchange, when I get margins, I won't keep it in my treasury chest. I will actually reinvest it into the risk-free securities. And the yield out of these investment income flows through my income statement as an exchange. So this forms a huge segment for the exchanges considering the size of the operations. It's 6 to 7% of revenue. So just for context, NSE, as everyone knows, made approximately 17,000 crores of top line. So 6 to 7% of it is roughly 1,000 crores. That was the quantum of investment income for NSE. So now that I've spoken a bit about the income side of things, we'll move on to the next section, which is the direct expenses. Now, in this case, I won't be speaking about your employee benefits or your other expenses, depreciation. I'll be speaking about the specific costs that only an exchange incurs. Firstly, it's the SEBI regulatory fee. So why is it required? It funds the SEBI's regulatory activities. How is it calculated? Again, it's kind of a take rate where SEBI charges approximately 1.2 rupees per 1 lakh of 1 crore of notional. Now, bear in mind, this is linked to the notional and not the premiums. And as everyone have seen that the growth of notional was very different to the growth of premiums. And finally, the difference in growth rate. So I'll illustrate this using NSE's numbers. So these are the numbers. The blue line is the regulatory expenses, and that has grown at the 10-year CAGR of 44%, whereas trading income that has grown at the 10-year CAGR of 29%. So although the quantums on an absolute basis are very different, but I wanted to show the growth rates and how they have differed, and I think the gap in the blue and the orange line successfully shows that. So coming to the next expense item, which an exchange pays. Clearing and settlement fees. So first I'll explain what clearing is and what settlement is. Firstly, settlement. Now let's look at the left hand side picture. Both the parties are trying to execute a financial transaction, but both of them are exposed to one particular risk, which is called as counterparty risk. They are scared of the other party defaulting on their trades. But let's see on the second side, what does a clearing corporation do about it? So the clearing corporation actually goes in between them, takes on all the counterparty risk onto itself, and becomes a buyer to every seller and seller to every buyer. Thereby, it's kind of insulating buyer and the seller as far as counterparty risk is concerned. Now in this case, let's take an example where the buyer defaults. In this case, given that the seller is insulated from the counterparty risk, he will want his money for the shares that he is offering to sell. Now in this case, the clearing corporation will come up with money from its own funds. The fund is called Settlement Guarantee Fund, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. But the clearing corporation will come up with the money using the Settlement Guarantee Fund and pay to the seller. Now in this case, the seller is insulated from the counterparty risk that the buyer poses. Also, what is clearing service? So clearing service is basically the back-end job that the clearing corporations do. It is kind of maintaining all the perfect communication between the clearing corporation on one side, and on the other side there's the exchange, custodial banks, depositories, etc. And to complete the transaction within the stipulated time periods. So there's the T+1 and T+0 time periods that they need to adhere to. And obviously for this they will charge a fee. Now in this case, the fee is charged on a per order basis, irrespective of the volumes. If I buy 1,000 shares or 1 share, the fee will be same. And what is the fee? The clearing and settlement fee is approximately 12 paise per order. So who clears in India? Now as far as stocks are considered, it will either be cleared by NSE Clearing, which is the wholly owned subsidiary of NSE, or ICCL, which is the wholly owned subsidiary of BSE. Now, what is the market share? So, NSE Clearing has an approximate market share of 95%, and the other 5% is held by ICCL. But why does market share matter? So, there are two reasons. Now, I'm sure everyone knows what investment income are. It is the yield on the margins that are distributed with the exchanges. But very specifically, margins are not deposited with the exchange. It is deposited with the wholly owned subsidiary of the exchange, which is the clearing corporation. Now, the clearing corporation will invest it and make money out of it. But it depends on to whom will I give a margin. As a futures trader, 95% of the time I'll be giving my margins to NSE clearing because they have a 95% market share. So 95% of the time they will be the one who is making the investment income. Now coming to the second reason why market share matters, clearing and settlement cost. So I'll explain this using an example. So let's look at the first two columns only, particulars and a standalone exchange. Now in this case, the standalone exchange does not have a subsidiary clearing corporation. So say there are 1,000 trades that are placed, 1,000 separate trades that are placed on the standalone exchange. In this case, 950 trades approximately will be cleared by NSE clearing and 50 trades by ICCL, given their market share. Now in this case, the clearing and settlement fee, so 95% of it will be cleared by NSE clearing. So 950 trades multiplied by 12 paise per trade. So it's approximately 114 rupees that will be paid to NSE clearing as their clearing corporation clearing fees, and the remaining 50 trades will be cleared by ICCL, so they will get approximately 6 rupees, totaling to approximately 120 rupees, which is fee per trade is 12 paise. Simple. Now in case of NSE and BSE, all the above conditions are the same. There are 1,000 trades, 950 of which are cleared by NSE clearing, and ICCL clears 50 trades. But one important thing is NSE, and it has a wholly owned subsidiary called NSE Clearing, and they will be clearing 95% of the trades. That's why effectively NSE won't pay anything to NSE Clearing, because at the time of consolidation, the income of the clearing corporation and the expense of the exchange will get set off. So effectively 0 rupees paid there, and 6 rupees will be paid to ICCL. So totaling to approximately 6 rupees to clear 1,000 trades, which yields an effective fee per trade of approximately 1 paise only, as compared to the standalone exchange who is paying 12 paise. The same is the case with BSE. So they won't pay anything to ICCL, which is their wholly owned subsidiary. So they will effectively pay approximately 11 paise per trade. That is derived from 114 divided by 1,000 trades. Yes. Now coming to the settlement guarantee fund. So I had discussed about this example where the buyer had defaulted and the clearing corporation used money out of its own funds. Now that fund is called a settlement guarantee fund, and its objective is to ensure settlement, that is guarantee settlement. And there are few rules around it that I'll discuss. So firstly, who determines the amount? The amounts are determined by SEBI in consultation with relevant stakeholders, and they imply multiple mathematical steps or Monte Carlo simulations to calculate the amount. But there are a few drivers which drive the SGF balance. So I'll discuss about the few drivers. Firstly, it's the overall market size. If the market is increasing, it makes sense to have a larger SGF. The second point being market volatility. If the volatility keeps on increasing, the odds of default might also increase. So again, it makes sense to have a larger SGF. And finally, the concentration on few brokers. So if the concentration on the top 2 or top 3 brokers is very large, and it has not been the case historically, then if they default, the loss would be very, very large. And that's why it again makes sense to have a larger SGF if the concentration on the top 2 or top 3 brokers increases. Now finally, who pays the amount to maintain the SGF? It is the exchanges and the clearing corporations who will contribute to form the settlement guarantee fund. And again, how is it held? It will be reinvested into the risk-free securities, that is the government securities, and all the interest income will not flow through the income statement. It will be recouped back into the settlement guarantee fund. So this was the discussion on the expense side of things. Now we'll talk about unit economics. So I hope everyone at the back are also able to see this. So unit economics in case of equity options. Now 1 unit basically means 1 contract. So let's see in case of NSE. So after the SEBI circular in October, I picked up the notional per contract after the circular. That was approximately 17 lakh rupees for NSE. And the average premium to notional ratio that again I've taken from the market is approximately 25 basis points. Now if I multiply these two figures, I come to the premium per contract, and that is approximately 4,200 rupees in case of NSE. And considering the take rate of NSE, which was approximately 35 rupees per 1 lakh of premiums, I come to an income of approximately 1.5 rupees per contract. Now coming to the expense side of things, first expense that I could model in here was the regulatory cost. This is the simple take rate, 1.2 rupees per 1 crore of notional. In this case, it's approximately 20 paise per contract. And there is the clearing and settlement cost that we spoke about, and the adjustment also we spoke about, that NSE clearing being a wholly owned subsidiary does not receive any money from from NSE, and given that they clear 95% of the trades, 95% of the clearing and settlement cost won't be paid by NSE. So thereby the effective clearing and settlement cost will be 1% per contract. So this yields a contribution for options or gross margin as far as options are considered of 1.3 rupees per contract, and that yields a margin of 86%. Now let's look at BSE. The factors are a bit inferior, so the notional per contract is a bit low than NSE, 16 lakhs. The premium to notional ratio is very low, approximately 11 basis points. And the premium, which is notional multiplied by premium to notional ratio, will effectively be lower. So it's approximately 1800 rupees per contract. And the income, again the take rate, 32.5 rupees per 1 lakh of premium traded on the BSE. So that's effectively 60 paise per contract, give or take. Now coming to the expense side of things, regulatory cost stays the same. Clearing and settlement cost will be adjusted for the market share of ICCL, that is approximately 11 paise per contract. Effectively, the contribution per option contract is a bit low, 27 paise per contract, and the margins are almost half, 47% per option contract. Now, just to show how volatile the margins are, I'll talk about stock options. So, stock options are only traded on NSE. There's rarely any volumes on BSE that I've seen. So, for NSE, the average notional per contract is a bit low, approximately 7 lakh rupees. So stock options was not affected by the SEBI circular. So they have a lower notional per contract, 7 lakhs. But the premium to notional ratio is very high. It's approximately 150 basis points. Effectively, the premium, that is notional multiplied by premium to notional ratio, is very high, 10,500 rupees. Now coming to the, so this yields an expense of 3.7 rupees per contract, which is considering the take rate. Now coming to the expense side of things, regulatory cost, which is simple to calculate, 1.2 rupees per 1 crore, and the adjusted clearing and settlement cost, which is approximately 1% per contract. This yields a contribution margin of 98%, which is massive as compared to the other two columns. So now that I've spoken about options, I think it will be a bit easy to speak about cash and futures. So firstly, NSE cash. The average value per trade that I've seen historically in the last 10 years for NSE has been approximately 30,000 rupees. That's the value per trade. So income is multiplied to the value per trade, that is 30,000, and the take rate for NSE is approximately 3 rupees per 1 lakh. So the income is 90 paise per trade. Now coming to the expense, regulatory cost, it is very low because the regulatory cost is also driven by the value per trade. So it's approximately 0.4 paise or 0.004 rupees. Coming to the clearing and settlement, we have discussed that ample times. It's approximately 1 paise per trade in this case. So this brings me to a gross margin of approximately 99%, which is huge. Now coming to BSE. So BSE has two columns, the first one being the normal and the second one being special, which is the exclusive stocks listed only on BSE, for which they charge a higher take rate. So let's look at the normal segment first. Average value per trade has been a bit lower as compared to NSE, so approximately 20,000 rupees. So they are considering the take rate of 3.75 rupees per 1 lakh of cash traded on BSE. The income is approximately 75 basis points. Now coming to the expense side of things, firstly regulatory cost, simply calculated as 1.2 rupees per 1 crore, that is 0.2 paise, and the adjusted clearing and settlement cost, 11 paise per trade. So this yields a contribution margin of 84%. It's a bit lower as compared to NSE. Now coming to the special side of things. So historically, the special has formed approximately 5% of the total BSE volumes, and normal has formed 95%. So again, considering an average value per trade of 20,000 rupees, the massive take rate of 100 rupees per 1 lakh of special stocks traded yields a massive income of 20 rupees per trade, assuming a 20,000 rupee size. And the regulatory cost stays the same, 0.2 paise regulatory cost, and again the clearing and settlement also stays the same, 11 paise per trade. So this yields a massive contribution margin of 99%. And finally, looking at the futures, which is only sold by NSE 99.5% of the time. So the average value per future contract that is traded on the exchange has been somewhere around 7 lakh rupees. Now considering the take rate 1.73 rupees per 1 lakh of futures traded, the income is approximately 12.11 rupees. The similar regulatory cost calculation, 8.4 paise for regulatory cost, and clearing and settlement 1 paise. That has been the constant. And this yields again a contribution margin of 99%. But given that the volumes that has been seen in the cash and future segment is very low as compared to the option volumes, they have not played a large role in driving the entire financials of NSE for the last few years. Now, finally coming to the Indian exchanges versus the global exchanges. Firstly, revenue mix of different exchanges. So the first two columns is basically NSE and BSE. So we know it is mainly driven by the transaction revenue, 80 to 70%. But let's look at a few global exchanges. Firstly, ICE. ICE stands for Intercontinental Exchange. They run the New York Stock Exchange. So for them, 50% of their income for the latest calendar year came from transaction services. But 45% of their income, interestingly, comes from tech and data services that they provide. So it includes your mortgage services that they have been streamlining the entire process of home loans, that is mortgage. So that way they have been making large income from tech and data services. Another exchange, the fourth column, is LSEG. LSEG stands for London Stock Exchange Group. Now in this case, they make 70% of their income from tech and data. Now a lot of you might have heard the term Refinitiv, which is a platform which provides financial data. So LSEG are the ones who own Refinitiv. They have been owning it since 2020, and they make approximately huge chunks of money in the tech and data segment from Refinitiv. And only a 19% section comes from transaction revenue for LSEG. Now coming to the another global exchange, CBOE. So CBOE stands for Chicago Board of Option Exchange. They are a pure play option exchange. They are operating out of USA, and they make approximately 80% of their income from transactions. Now interestingly, Chicago Board of Option Exchange is also very, very dependent on the expiry day options, that is the weekly options, and they have massive volumes that are seen from the retailer segment, as high as 30 to 40% of the total volumes being contributed to by the retailers. And they make another 18% from tech and data services. Now let's look at a few Asian exchanges. Hong Kong Stock Exchange, that is HKEX. So they make a diversified pool of revenue, 32% coming from transactions and 26% coming from a clearing and settlement services that they have been providing. The final column talks about SGX, which is the Singapore exchange. They make approximately 54% of the revenue from transactions, the others being diversified. The key takeaway here is that every exchange in the globe is very different, and you actually need to look deep inside the exchange to understand if this is a relevant peer or not for the Indian exchanges. Coming to the next slide. This speaks about volumes and premiums. So I'm sure a lot of you might have read articles where they have said that volumes for India are the largest in the entire world. Rightly said. In fact, if we compare India and US, Indian volumes are almost 4 times the volume seen in the US. But let's flip the narrative and talk about premiums, premium per day. So in this case, if we compare the US and the Indian premiums on a premium per day figure, approximately so the US premiums are approximately 3 times the Indian premiums. So that's a very huge shift. And that is because of the premium per contract that is seen in the US. So in India, average premium per contract, as we have seen in the unit economics discussion, approximately 2 to 4,000 rupees per contract. But in US, it's approximately 30 to 40,000 rupees, or in dollar terms, approximately $400 to $500 per contract. Again, on an average. Now coming to the second last slide, revenue per F&O contract. So there's a business model which is very relevant outside India, that they make money out of per contract basis. They are not the ad valorem business model exchanges that the Indian exchanges are. So if I were to look at the website of ICE, they have clearly stated that they charge approximately $1.5, which is approx 120 rupees per equity, financial equity option contract. And the case for B3, so B3 stands for the Brazilian Stock Exchange, they charge approximately 15 rupees per equity F&O contract. CBOE, that is the Chicago Board of Option Exchange, they charge approximately 23, and Hong Kong Exchange charges approximately 40 rupees. Versus if I were to calculate the revenue per F&O contract for NSE and BSE, they charge in the range of 1 to 2 rupees depending on the exchange. So that's how that's big the difference is. And finally, coming to a financial metric comparison chart where I've compared the market caps for the various exchanges and including revenue, PAT margins, ROE, and the trailing 12-month Ps that have been visible. So yes, thank you for your attention. This was my presentation.
Hi, Shantanu. Very nice presentation. So, on the expense side, I think there was one big expense that they used to give some incentives to the brokers for the turnover, which I think was waived off. So, how big was that saving?
Um, so I actually need to check the exact saving quantum, but it was more relevant from a broker perspective because they used to charge the entire amount to their clients and they used to pocket the gap. But from an exchange point of view, I'll need to check the exact quantum. It was not very huge as far as exchanges are concerned because the underlying volumes were growing very rapidly.
Any more questions? We'll move to the Zoom audience. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask if you have any questions.
Hey, hi. The US higher premium, is it due to the the size of the stocks on the contract, the lot size? What is driving a higher premium in US compared to India?
So premium is driven by multiple factors as we spoke, and they have a lot of dependence outside the weekly segment as well, which drives the premium a lot. So the number of days to expiry is a big driver for premium per contract. Yes, that is one of the key reasons. And obviously the value of the underlying asset is also larger. It's driving multiple factors drive the premium to premium per contract. So these might be the larger ones.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Very detailed, but a little fast also to comprehend everything. I just want to ask you, like, what happened with IEX, the market coupling, and some of the regulatory issues that we have in all that you're reading, because right now NSE is very, very dominant compared to BSE. It's like, they've just run away, and probably there are certain controls and all, but do you see anything where SEBI would try and rebalance the exchanges? Is that even a possibility?
So you're asking from okay, the stock exchanges specifically, no? So there are a few news articles, a few interviews that have come across where they have been talking about the weekly contracts and how dominant they are. They are still the largest income stream as well as a source of speculation. So there might be a few cases where we could see uh, further curbing in weekly derivatives so that the structural integrity of the entire market infrastructure doesn't go for a toss.
But there's nothing specific as of now.
No, nothing specific that I've come across.
So you talked about the charges per transaction cash, which is NSE charging approximately 2 rupees, BSE charging approximately 1 rupees, LSEG charging 9.2 rupees per transaction.
Hmm.
Does SEBI regulates the transaction cost?
Yes, so you will need to take permission of SEBI and get an approval from SEBI. Only then you will be able to increase or decrease transaction charge. That's one. And secondly, the overall notion has been to reduce the charges. There is little to no possibility of incremental charges to be charged, at least to the investors. So that was my understanding with a few discussions.
Great presentation. So I have a main question is how much of the revenue is from the weekly option transactions
So
or
let me
total revenue?
right, sure. So for NSE, I'll speak. Approximately 80% of the total revenue from operation comes from transaction income. So out of the total 80%, 75% of that, which is approximately 60%, that will come from options. So and weekly options form approximately 65 to 70% of the total option segment. So 36 to 40% would be my guess as to how dependent on the weekly segment they are. And then there are ancillary revenues because of weekly segment. There's co-location, there's data service. And if you add all of that up, it could easily be 50%, 45 to 50%. That would be my guess. Could be higher or lower, but that's about
So
it.
the co-location Are mainly focusing on weekly options, is it?
No, so co-location is mainly focusing on the HFTs, and HFTs are mainly focusing on the liquidity. So wherever liquidity is available, they'll pounce on that liquidity. And for that to happen, you need a counterparty. For the HFTs, generally the counterparties are individual traders. So individual traders are kind of the liquidity. They take away all the liquidity which is provided by the HFTs. HFTs sell option contracts. Individuals buy them. And if there is no individual to buy, there won't be any seller. So effectively, your co-location will go for a toss. Your weeklies, if you're assuming, if they go for a toss. So that's how I look at it.
So where is the liquidity maximum?
Weekly segment.
Is it weekly segment?
It is the, especially even in the weekly segment, it is the 0 days to expiry and 1 day to expiry. Massive there. So approximately 50 to 60% of the weeklies was focused on the 0 days expiry and 1 day expiry. So that's how focused things are.
Okay.
Analysis on how much NEC would benefit by shifting expiry from Thursday to Tuesday? More days to expire, so I guess.
No, the number of days to expiry stays the same because option contracts will expire once a week. But wouldn't be very material. I have not done a specific analysis for this, and this has already has happened. So we could easily observe with a few quarters. We could easily understand what is the impact. But wouldn't be a huge or a massive needle mover for a big exchange like NSE.
And in GIFT, I think they were proposing a daily expiry contract.
Yes.
For the
So daily expiry basically means expiry every day. So they are offering weekly contracts and they are offering 5 weekly contracts. So they'll be covering all 5 days. But yes, liquidity or volumes overall in Gift City is not very huge. Not a needle mover in the near to medium term. I don't know about the long term, but could be an interesting thing to look at. So they are providing not only weekly expiries, but they also have the existing SGX Nifty futures, which are existing, and they are that is the largest contract that is traded in the Gift City. So they have approximately 90+ % market share there.
Thanks.
Very good presentation. I would like you to go back to co-location fees.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that have you, even now, if I'm a small broker, I will not afford a large size messaging services. So I will be using 40 messages per second.
Sure.
Okay, and Ashish bhai sitting behind me, maybe taking 400 messages per second.
Sure.
So even today,
Hmm.
there is a differentiation of my trade going into the exchange and his trade, speed of his trade going into the exchange. Isn't it so?
Number of messages is number of the say for example, all of your messages are buy orders. So at the max per second, you will be able to place 40 buy orders, and the gentleman sitting behind you will be able to place 400 orders. That's it. The
So
speed stays the same.
No. Yeah. So he is pushing 400 order. I am unable to push
Yes.
because I am unable to afford.
Yes.
Okay. So whole co-location case was exactly this. Okay.
The Colo scam.
Yeah. Because it said that 2 brokers got preferential treatment. Okay. For pushing their order into the system. At that point in time, there was a company. So if I do this, so if ideally if the exchanges decide that everybody will get the same message per second, then their revenue will get affected or not?
No. So firstly, in the Colo scam, people got preference, but the preference was towards the emptier servers. So there are say 5 servers, of which 4 are occupied by say 10 brokers. That there is one backup server which is empty and no one is positioned in that server. Now say for example, I am giving preference to 2 brokers. They will get access to that specific empty server, and that will increase the speed because the latency will be very low for that empty server. It's like an highway. So there are 5 highways, 4 mein there's a lot of traffic. In the 5th one, it's an empty road. So obviously I'll reach the end of the towards my destination faster because the traffic will be very low. So that's how I looked at the colo scam, and that's how the preference was. The number of messages is just a money game. If you have more money, you will get to place more buy orders.
So exchanges will earn less if I'll have push less messages.
Yes, but then you'll also make less money because you won't be able to.
Correct. But for exchange,
Yes.
higher messaging is preferred because they will make more money, isn't it? So?
Sure. Including that, it will also bring in your take rates, that your option take rates and whatever. So that will obviously make sense for an exchange. Yes.
So co-location, the higher. So what I'm trying to drive a point is, the higher number of messages subscribers, higher is the income.
Yes.
Thank
I'm not sure if preference is driven that way, but yes, that conclusion is appropriate. Yes.
You're seeing any volume decrease after the SEBI circular in retail participation, and how is it affecting the overall volume profitability of both exchanges in terms of weekly options also, monthly options also, or other FNO and stock as well as index?
So the SEBI circular, the October 2024 circular, that was only targeting the weekly options. So it didn't affect futures, didn't affect cash, at least directly. There could be second order effects. But as far as the weekly segment is concerned, so say a retailer is washed out because of the higher premiums, or there are less products. So I as a retailer can't play there. Now, given that I can't play there, my counterparty will also not be able to play there. And that's why it will have a double whammy on the entire volume. So that's how I look at it, and that's how
But are you seeing any trend there in terms of percentage decrease in volume? Because we are already seeing some decrease in volume
yes,
in FY24 to FY25.
yes.
But is it predominantly because of that circular?
Yes, I feel that's the case, and that's what the con call has also been indicating towards, that the circular was a very turning inflection point. For one it was
That's right.
negative,
Yeah.
for one it was positive. For our overall market volumes perspective, in the short term it's negative because you saw a degrowth. But structurally, it makes sense to have less speculation and more hedging.
Any questions from the Zoom audience? Seems like none. Any questions from the live audience here? Shantanu is with us, so if you want to pick his brain about a lot of these things, he is here for dinner, so you can ask him afterwards as well. Cool. Yeah, there's one question. I'll come with the mic to you.
Any thoughts on so these new exchanges have raised capital from some marquee investors like MSCI, NCDEX. So any thoughts? How does the competition, the landscaping?
So MSCI, so the main driver for incomes for an exchange is options today, and options will drive your ancillary income. And in case of options, it's weekly options that will be driving your main revenue, as we concluded approximately 40 to 50%. And as per the rules, in a week now there are only 2 days where I can place my weekly expiries. It's Tuesday and Thursday, as you said. So both the days are still dominated by NSE and BSE. NSE dominates Tuesday, Thursday is dominated by BSE. So now if I were to place an exchange in either of the days, there is already superior liquidity in the other exchanges. So a third exchange, as far as an option perspective, would be a bit difficult to scale. But then again, obviously, I don't know about the future, but it could be better. But yeah.
No worry. Thanks.
This initiative is undertaken solely with the objective of educating people at large about financial concepts, sectoral knowledge, and related matters. It is intended only for general awareness and learning purposes and should not be construed as advice, recommendation, or solicitation to buy, sell, or hold any securities or financial instruments. The information and views expressed are based on current understanding and are subject to change over time with evolving market conditions, regulatory developments, and other factors. The presenter or the company they are associated with may have existing exposure or professional knowledge relating to the sectors, themes, or concepts discussed. This does not, however, constitute a recommendation or endorsement. Participants and readers are strongly encouraged to exercise their own judgment and seek professional guidance before making any financial or related decisions. This initiative should be viewed purely from an educational perspective and nothing else.